Now, what is Biden going to do when it comes to climate change? Well, he is giving us signals that he prioritizes it. He has brought people into his administration that have, backgrounds in climate science or in dealing with it. Some of his initial day one executive orders have been pretty positive, shutting down the Keystone XL pipeline. He apparently is going to be protecting Anwar and a number of other things. But there is more that can be done. And actually one possibility that we had talked about close to 2 years ago as something that a future Democratic president could do was brought up in a recent interview by Rachel Maddow of Chuck Schumer. Here's what he had to say.
Describe to me new Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer's main legislative priorities. Obviously, we have some things that are not legislative technically, the impeachment of the president, the new president's cabinet.
Can I say one other thing on climate?
Please.
I think it might be a good idea for President Biden to call a climate emergency.
Why?
Because then it relates to what you're saying. Then he can do many, many things under the emergency powers of the president that wouldn't have to go through, that he could do without legislation. Now, Trump used this emergency for a stupid wall, which wasn't an emergency. But if there ever was an emergency, climate is one. So I would suggest that they explore looking at climate as an emergency, which would give them more flexibility. After all, it's a crisis. It's a crisis.
Okay, so he's saying that this is a possibility, and like I said, we had talked about when Trump declared the emergency at the southern border, that's the sort of power that can be used, in a different direction under another president. So, Adrienne, what do you think about that as a possible way to deal with some of the obstruction?
It's an excellent way to deal with it. The thing is it is an emergency. It's just not impacting wealthy white people. We have black and brown people who are forced to live in segregated areas of cities where they are exposed to pollutants and to toxins, and it impacts their lungs. And that's why we see high rates of death for black and brown people from COVID-19. And also research shows that Black people in terms in the United States, they end up consuming 50% more of the pollution than they actually generate as a community. And so there are people out there already suffering and experiencing it. And just because they're not wealthy or white doesn't mean that it's not a problem. We are all part of the United States and our voices should be heard, and we should also be protected under the law and have our leaders take these steps necessary to end these things that are going on that are eventually going to hold us all back and hurt us all.
Yeah, and I think, look, it certainly is an actual emergency. If it makes it a little bit easier for Biden to do something about it, then great. But I would also say, as someone who's naturally suspicious of Democratic leadership, Chuck Schumer, it's a little bit convenient of you that you think the path to dealing with the climate is Biden should do something. Well, sure, he should. But you have to do stuff too, because you just became Senate Majority Leader again, and we sort of have expectations of you as a leader. Because it is easier for you to tell Biden to declare a climate emergency than for you to get rid of the filibuster so you can pass the Green New Deal, and to actually support the Green New Deal, or to whip the votes necessary to either do the destruction of the filibuster or passing the Green New Deal. Like all of that stuff that Biden can do, whether it's in the form of executive orders or declaring an emergency or whatever, is good. But we can do multiple things at the same time. And you have to actually do something. If you want to be in leadership, you have to be a leader. And bringing it up at all is something. Doing it in an interview that many people are gonna watch is good because it perhaps creates expectations on Joe Biden. So that's good, but it is not a get out of being a leader free card. That isn't actually how this works. And so if Chuck Schumer is gonna hold that position rather than offering it up to a Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren or whoever else might actually wanna wield the power a little bit more, that's potentially problematic. And we're gonna have to keep an eye on him too. For more political news breakdowns, interviews, stories of activism, and me trying my hardest to care about the occasional big celebrity news story, subscribe to our YouTube channel at youtube.com/thedamagereport. And you can ring the bell wherever it is so you don't miss anything.